Hello, I'm Kråkan, also known as Corvus Cornix, so welcome to Yacc, yet another Crowcast where I pick a game, I play it for a week, and then I'll talk about it. This week's game is Bamse for the Game Boy. It was released in 1993, developed by Laserbeam, and also published by Laserbeam. And also there'll be spoilers up ahead, just so you know, but first a little backstory. So I got this game as a kid from a toy store that doesn't exist anymore, and I didn't know it then, but this is apparently a game that was exclusive to Sweden, and it's a reskin of another, well, not popular game, but another Game Boy game called Baby T-Rex, so that's why I played it this week, I guess. So before I talk about the game, I have to explain about the character of Bamse. So he is this anthropomorphic bear in blue suspender pants with yellow buttons and a blue woolen cap. And he has a lot of friends and enemies, and he started out as a comic book, like a kid's cartoon. And his friends are Skalman, which is this turtle or tortoise that is like an inventor. He has this watch which he goes strictly by, so he goes to sleep at certain hours and eat at certain hours, which generally leads to problems with adventuring and stuff, because generally when they need him, he's, like asleep. And then we have the other character, which is a cowardly rabbit called nicest. Think Piglet from the Winnie the Pooh series. So the whole gimmick to this character is that his grandma makes honey for him, and that makes him super strong. He can lift like buses and stuff. It's a cartoon character, but anyone else who eats this honey, they get like a stomach ache for 3 days or something. And there's also that, I guess. So the character itself was drawn by Rune Andersson, or Andersen, and it was created in 1966, and in 1973 it got its own like comic magazine book kind of thing. So as you start up the game, you get a little cutscene. Apparently the main characters, Skalman, Bamse, and nicest, time travel with a time machine, because of course they have. They travel 75 million years back into the past where there's dinosaurs. And the main villain, Vargen, or I guess he's a Varg, a black Varg, and he kidnaps Skalman and takes him to his evil castle. And already I'm like, this was not part of the comics, but it gets worse from here, I guess. So of course nicest is afraid, the little rabbit, but Bamse goes head into adventure to find his friend. There's also an options mode when you can select 1 player, 2 player, and turn the music on and off, and that's about it. So I guess if there's like a 2-player game, you kind of hand your Game Boy from, well, one another. So the first level is the jungle, and you have 4 lives to start with, and you can take 4 hits before you go into a black cloud of smoke, I guess. You can also run into pitfalls that will kill you instantly and whatnot. So the main thing about this game, you pick up these honey jars strewed out throughout the stages, but instead of like the comic book way where he eats the honey and gets strong, he throws the cans or the jars at the enemies, in this case dinosaurs. I don't know why, but yeah, it's just a reskin of another game. So at the end of the level, you jump onto a stone that says exit, and he does a little happy PG approved dance. Think Crash Bandicoot, when he clears a level. So you earn points by taking out Aerodactyls, these flying dinosaurs, and the time left also the more time you have left on your watch when you leave the exit or leave for the exit, the more points you get. You also get points for the number of honey jars you have. And I think if you have like 50 or more, you will trigger a bonus game where you slide down a hill and collect more honey jars for points. So the stupid thing about this, if you hit something like an enemy or spikes or anything in the level, you lose a couple of honey jars, not all of them. And the enemies in these levels are also there's a particular enemy that's an ant, and Bamse throws the honey jar in an arc, so it's hard to hit these ants, and they don't give you any points as far as I know, so you just kind of have to avoid them. And throughout the stage you also encounter these dragons. So yet again, this game was a reskin of another game called Baby T-Rex. So I guess it's just like, just change a couple of, sprites and whatnot and move on. I mean, back in the day, companies did this all the time. So the second level introduces a friendly pterodactyl that will take you to one of the higher nests of the level. And this is where the agony starts, because this level is timed like any other, but you're kind of tight on time. So if you fall down a ledge, you have to get back again. And there are these hovering platforms with palm trees that works as trampolines to get you higher up. So there are a lot of blind jumps and try to position yourself right, but it's not that difficult. It's just trial and error, I guess. And this is one of the other things that annoyed me about this game. Every time when Bamse goes to the edge of like a slope, he careens down it like he's on steroids or something, like if he was on a skateboard. And he didn't do that in the comics as well. So if you slide down one of these slopes, which is inevitable, you will eventually run into spikes and more blind jumps. So sometimes you want to press on the D-pad to kind of get a running start, and sometimes you need to break a lot of trial and error just knowing where these spikes are and where these blind kind of pitfalls are. So there are a couple of power-ups in this game. You have the skateboard, which comes up in the Crystal Cave levels. And basically you go faster on a skateboard and you do all kinds of flips and stuff. Definitely not like the comic as far as I remember. And then you have a shield icon that it's like the star in Mario, you get a brief time of invincibility. And then you also can pick up hearts throughout the levels that will give you an extra life. So on stage 4 I realized that if you collect 50 cans of, honey, the special honey, you will trigger a bonus game where you collect more jars of honey. So I'm not actually sure if this is like a mandatory thing or if it's just random, but I triggered it anyway. And then it's time for the first boss. So I wrote here in my notes, ugly Brontosaurus face, because it's really ugly. It has this distorted face and its neck is just literally a couple of balls. So the strategy to this is just keep to the left and throw honey jars at it. And at this stage you have unlimited like jars of honey. So the game actually has a lot of slowdown throughout this boss fight, but it actually helped me in my favor because I had time to react to the balls that he was spitting. And I remember this boss was so hard when I was a kid, but I cleared that first try when I did it. And it's one of those things I didn't talk about, but I didn't emulate this game. I actually played on Game Boy hardware. So I don't know how I did it as a kid, but I did it then. So then the crystal caves are up, you get a little cutscene, and this level introduces some new enemies. There are these kind of worms that looks like spaghetti, I guess. And then you have these armadillos that will charge you. And this level also introduced the skateboard, which is not that helpful. It just makes the level harder in my opinion because everything goes fast and you have to react faster. And this level also introduced a lot of pitfalls and these kind of boiling lava pits that will shoot up fireballs. And also, I think it's level 2 in the crystal caves will introduce these fireflies and they will annoy you. They will fly around you until you hit them or until they respawn or off-spawn across the screen. So this is where I got my first game over. It showed a wizard on a mechanical dinosaur, and this is one of the sprite leftovers from the original Baby T-Rex game, I believe. So I didn't feel that cheated. I could restart from the beginning of the crystal caves and I had 4 lives to go with, so yeah, I didn't feel too bad about it. So the boss of the crystal cave is this huge Aerodactyl that drops eggs that will hatch and spawn more Aerodactyls, and you just shoot it down with your honey jars. And then after that, the castle walk stage is basically a long castle walk where you go on the back of dinosaurs, and it's more of like a timing thing, and you avoid the spikes and Aerodactyls and these statues that look like vampire that drip some kind of acid. You also avoid boilers, or boulders I should say, not boilers. And there was another power-up that I forgot to talk about, but there's this bowling ball that you can throw like in a path and it will take out enemies on the way. And the boss on this stage is a Stegosaurus that flings its like fins, I guess, at you, and you just bombard it with your honey jars. And then you have the last boss tower, and you confront the main boss, Vargens, on this mechanical kind of dinosaur, and you take him out, and the second phase is him like Robotnik, he's in this flying thing and you take him out, and that's more or less the end of the game. You go back to your own timeline and yeah, that's it. So gameplay. Go through the levels, stop Vargens' evil scheme and save Skalman in the end. Control, the D-pad moves Bamse around, the A button jumps, and B throws the honey jars. Start pauses, and this is a feature that the Game Boy has. If you press start select A, B at the same time, you will return to the title screen, and it works in pretty much every Game Boy game that I know of. Graphics. The Game Boy is limited in every way. It's like a black and white and it doesn't have that much going for it, but it's charming graphics. So last week I picked up a Game Boy Pocket at Retro Gathering, this collector's kind of convention, and the whole point was so I could play Game Boy games on the podcast, so that's what I did. It's hard to actually see what you're doing on this tiny little screen. It's like 2 inches or something, it's ridiculous, but if you find like a good lamp you can actually get some good visuals. And this Game Boy Pocket is on its last legs and it has problems, the screen flickers a bit, but I could at least play the game, so that's the whole point of it. Easter egg seekers and glitches. So this game, as I said before, is a sprite swap of another game called Baby T-Rex. And it added a couple of cutscenes and changed the sprites. That's about it. And there was there are a couple of games, I think it was called We're Back. It was based on this dinosaur movie, and they kind of did a sprite swap of that as well. And then there was this weird puppet game where it was like an Australian kind of Saturday cartoon morning thing with a Muppet puppet. And he had got his own sprite swap as well. So there are like 4 games. And I guess that's why Bamse is so rare, because it was only released in a little small amount in Sweden. It's kind of amazing. As a kid, I didn't even know this. I just recognized the character from the comics, and I said, I'm a little bit too old for this, but it was kind of cheap, so I picked it up, and I'm glad I did, because I played the game this week on real hardware, and that's the way you should do, in my opinion. So in conclusion, I wrote, yes, try it if you can. So this game is part of my childhood, like many games that I talk about on this podcast. The main grudge I have with the Game Boy that I totally forgot was the screen size. It's super small, and it's hard to see what you're doing, but I got a better light at the end of the week, I guess, so I could see what I was doing. So another thing, I got into more retro stuff and retro gathering as well. I followed a streamer called Grannen Hero. Fortunately now he doesn't stream a lot, and I think he actually quit streaming. He and his girlfriend did. So he's the one that got me into this more of a retro kind of thing, and I went to conventions and opened up to people and got into the collection. And the cool thing about him here is that he actually played, I think I mentioned it on another podcast, but he actually completed all the Game Boy games live on Twitch, which is crazy. There's like 500 games or something like that, and he beat it all. And it's like, and we talked about Bamse as well, and he said that's a rare game, and I was like, I have that in my drawer somewhere. Yeah, and he said, keep that, because that's going to be worth a lot of money one day. And of course it was. So it's kind of like this connection with all other things, and it's part of the experience, I guess. So at least you can check this game out on YouTube if you're curious, because it's part of, my history, and it's kind of an interesting game to look up. So anyway, thanks for listening and or watching, and take care.